Coming up in the Authorpreneur Podcast. Welcome to the 99th episode of the Authorpreneur Podcast. Yes, I'm doing the countdown thing, and yep, it's super dorky, but I'm embracing it anyway. But back to the matter at hand. In this episode, I share my writing and publishing misadventures during the months of March and April, so stay tuned. Welcome to the Authorpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, mystery author Amelia D. Hay. On this podcast, I will bring you writing, book marketing, and self-publishing advice so that you can create your dream author business, build your author platform, and be creatively independent. You can find the episode show notes and lots more information on the podcast page at authorpreneurpodcast.com/podcast. Hello writers, at present I'm struggling to sell to book 2 in my Amateur Sleuth series, and I'm going into detail about my experiments to get this book selling, and I discuss my issues with going direct to Barnes & Noble upon receiving the advice of going wide in a webinar. Let's just say that I regret leaving Draft2Digital, and Draft2Digital like, yay! I mean, they didn't miss me, trust me. And I discuss how I've screwed up my Amateur Sleuth mystery series. I don't know, saying that kind of gives me anxiety. But without further ado, let's get on with the episode. Just to let you know, this episode was recorded on Tuesday, the 25th of April. Yep. So this show is me primarily looking back at March and April. And if you're on the YouTube, if you're watching the video episode, you'll notice I'm wearing exactly the same outfit, so you'll know that I recorded this and the previous episode together. Yep, life of a content creator. Throughout this episode, I'll be referencing tools and services that I've used. If you're interested in reading the transcript or would like links to anything that I've mentioned in the show, then check out the very long blog post or edited transcripts at authorpreneurpodcast.com/BTS052. And if you're new to the podcast, I want to say a huge thank you for stopping by and trying out my show. To those of you who've been faithfully listening, thank you for regularly listening in and supporting me. Your support means more to me than you know. So a few things happened to me. Let me backtrack. A few fascinating things happened to me this month. They got in the way of me recording my podcast episodes. The first was my husband was sick and he worked from home for a while. I'm tempted to say it was more than a week. It was because for me, the weekends don't happen for me because I work from home all the time. My computer's always here, so there's always opportunity to work, right? So I don't notice the weekends. So he's been home. He was home for a very long time. That's how it felt for me. And I felt bad saying,
"Oh, hey babe, do you think you can die a little quieter so I can record my podcast?"
It just feels a bit, and the award for the worst wife ever goes to yours truly. So I thought I can't, even asking him to leave the room the office space we have in our house so I can record, it just feels like next level douchey. It just feels like, maybe it's because maybe I put more value on what he does than what I do. Maybe it's sort of coming down to that. But at the same time, he has with his work, there is an element of confidentiality with it. So I've got to be careful. And because he's a software engineer, it's just like, they find an excuse to do a meeting for everything. So he's constantly on whatever the Google equivalent of it is. Maybe it's Google Meet now it's called. He's always on Google Meet having meetings with his coworkers. So I can't always record because you can hear, because this microphone, you can probably hear, I have to edit out footsteps from upstairs and outside and all sorts of things. It's a dream. Because there's a confidential element to his work, I had to wait for his working from home period to come to an end so I could get back to podcasting. At the same time, I was struggling with my mental health. Honestly, this has been happening on and off since lockdown. Like I just haven't been the same since. And it's not because I'm putting any pressure on myself to earn anything particular because we need that money. I've become a hermit and there are mental health consequences for that. And I have a health issue of my own. So this is going to be a little TMI because I'm always afraid to talk about the health issues I experience as a female writer, and they do get in the way of writing sometimes. I found out that this is actually not common, but the only requirement for you to get this thing that I have is you have to have a uterus. So you too, if you have a uterus, could get this too. So if you're a bit queasy and just would rather not, you should skip forward to this time frame. I have uterine fibroids, and what they are is they're growths that are attached. From what I understand, they attach to the arteries that are attached to the uterus. So in a nutshell, I'm constantly bleeding, and I have trouble differentiating between the fibroid-related bleeding because it's attached to those arteries and veins and like my actual period. And I'm at an age where I should know, and there are normally, if my body's healthy and my menstrual cycle is healthy, then there are certain indicators this thing is going to happen soon, for me at least. I don't know if the fibroids are affecting my hormones, and I think just the constant bleeding is making me hard to tell what's going on with my body. And at one stage I thought I was in perimenopause, but my gynecologist just completely disagreed with me. He says I'm too young. At the same time, because it can be hard for me to do all the things I want because I feel tired and it can be difficult to concentrate, especially when my period does happen and the bleeding is quite heavy. It sounds worse than what it is. It's just because if you bleed a lot, you could eventually become anemic. That can be a consequence of that. And I'm not there yet, but I'm definitely experiencing the symptoms of feeling tired, dizzy, and the ability to concentrate. My ability to do work for long periods of time, it's kind of gone. And I haven't got COVID. I didn't get COVID. What I got is this. Not that you can catch it, and looking back over lockdown, I can sort of see, yeah. And because of the way the NHS is at the moment, which is the National Health System, in case you're from America, it's been hard for me to see a doctor. I saw a doctor in November, and then for multiple reasons, I won't bore you to tears, but I haven't been able to see him since. And I've been trying to book an appointment since the 5th of April to see my gynecologist, but it just hasn't worked out like that. I haven't been able to see him. So, and there's a cure for it. I just need to get them removed, which could be as easy as I think just like keyhole surgery, like a laparoscopy, potentially. It's probably got a different name, but that's my TMI health issues. So the first 3 weeks in April were quite wild for me because I think I can't remember when my last podcast episode was recorded, because I want to say it was recorded. Yeah, I released it on the 27th of March. And yeah, so those first 3 weeks in April were wild. And I've gotten to a place now where I have the energy to record a podcast episode. I did actually consider going to emergency over the weekend. It's how bad it got, but I digress. At the start of April, as I was getting back into the rhythm of writing book 3, the locked room moved up in the queue and became available for proofreading. So I put the writing of book 3 on pause, obviously, to work on these edits and publish the novella. And that took, I think, roughly a week. And again, I'm about to talk about something I'm not sure if I should really talk about, but I'm going to do it anyway because that's the spirit of this. That's the brand I've created for myself, right? I just say things and I'm brutally honest. Yeah. Whether I should or shouldn't, hindsight's 20/20. The one thing I have noticed about the editing process is that I'm no longer blindly accepting the edits, and I've started rejecting a small portion of them because I want the narrative to sound a certain way when it's read aloud. So I discovered this issue while reading the candidate aloud on my YouTube channel. At times I felt that the editor didn't get that. I guess this is more the line editor didn't get the narrative is from the character's point of view, and therefore it's opinion based. And often I was pushed to explain how a character knows something. For instance, in one scene, James describes the curtain's material as thick, heavy drapes. So my editor, wrote a note wanting to know, how does he actually know the curtains are heavy? And it's just one of those things, because he's been why am I saying a lot? That's really irritating. So there's a part of me that thinks, who cares about the drapes? This is just his opinion. And so I just said, this is his opinion. So I replied back politely and just said, this is his opinion on the drapes. It's just, you're going to get a lot of opinion-based things and they're not necessarily facts. He doesn't actually know that they're heavy. He just thinks they are. So then she changed the wording from heavy to heavy looking. So I will open the locked room and I'll give you an example. Hopefully I haven't used the word heavy a lot in my book. And you can actually do like a find and replace in the locked room as well. In the center of the room was a large window dressed with a pair of thick, heavy red drapes that reminded him of the Persian rugs from downstairs. That's the sentence. So it was changed in the edit to, in the center of the room was a large window dressed with a pair of thick, heavy-looking red drapes that reminded him of the Persian rugs downstairs. And I sort of feel like the word heavy looking, I feel like it's adding clutter to the words in the sentence. Whereas the other thing is, because he doesn't exist in a vacuum, he's obviously lived at places before here and he's seen curtains and he's felt certain materials. So it's like, I shouldn't have to sort of explain that he's actually touched this fabric before in a previous house long ago. It's just not relevant to the story, and it doesn't tell you something about the character either. It doesn't bring James and the reader closer together, talking about how he knows the drapes are heavy. This is just his opinion. And people can be wrong about their opinions on things, but we are by nature opinionated. It just sounded clunky, and I felt it was better without the word looking being hyphenated, being attached to the word heavy via hyphenation. I just sort of feel like it was better without it. So I rejected that change. And there was also another moment where he thinks that another person's workout gear is made out of a sweat-resistant material. And again, the editor wanted to know how he knew this. And again, it's his opinion on the clothing. It's not fact. He just thinks that looks like sweat-resistant material. And I shouldn't have to stop the narrative to explain to the reader that he knows this because he's seen the material before or he's touched other thick, heavy fabrics. Pointing out stuff like this isn't important to the story. It's not important to his backstory. And it's just opinion on the setting and events. And this is what you sign up for, is you want, like when you read a book, is you're reading it from the character's point of view and you want to know what they feel about it. This is what connects you to a character. And I don't know if this is a sign that I need to find a new editor or if it's just what the editing process is like, and I've just evolved and changed and I've just stopped blindly accepting things, and I've valued this is how I want it to sound over something being correct. I am starting to feel a bit frustrated because at the same time, like I think my editor's trying to be helpful, and how I react to her helpfulness isn't her problem, it's my problem. That's the way I'm choosing to look at this. I'll see if I can find I found the sentence now. So it's the door flung open. Actually, that's the sentence before. So the door flung open. Standing before him was Sybil in what appeared to be workout gear. Black leggings, a tight black t-shirt with sweat-resistant material, bright pink trainers, and a matching bright pink hand towel. And this sort of says something about the character too. This person's quite, maybe neurotic's not the word, but having colours together that visually match is actually really important to this character. And you can tell by this outfit, and it sort of says something about it. Some people, it doesn't matter. They just wear all black and they don't care, or they wear black and a bit of grey to the gym. And it's not like this isn't important, but to this character, dressing like this is important. So you're sort of learning something here about the character. And what's more important is you get the visual picture of how they're looking, as opposed to why he knows that the material is sweat resistant. And I guess that's the issue with line editing, is stuff like this crops up, and it is, I used to really love the editing process. At times it's frustrating. At other times it's fine. It's not so much the number of edits that I have to do, because there is a part of me that thinks if I don't have a correction on every line, I sort of think, why am I paying you? Like, I want you to find everything. And part of this is a difference of opinion, and learning how to share these differences of opinion in a way that's diplomatic and not awful. And I do have that skill set, but I sort of feel like, this is my podcast and I can vent my frustrations, right? And it makes the experience more real for you as well, if I'm not just talking about, I
love editing and it's so perfect.
Yeah, it's not true. It's more real if I'm honest with you and say, I'm finding this frustrating. At this stage in my career, I'm finding this frustrating, but I still value it. And I still don't want to find another editor because I am happy working with this person. I'm just sort of speculating. Why do I feel like this? I'm just trying to understand it for myself as well. So let's get on to a little bit of book marketing before I talk about more writing things. I'm struggling to sell my second book in a series. So I'm giving away book 1 easily. For some reason, actually, I don't know why this is happening. I'm giving away book 1 easily because, let's face it, it's free. And who doesn't love a freebie, right? This is the problem you have when you give away something for free, like that first book in the series. So the way that I've written book 1 isn't like, I've recently finished reading, what is it called? Don't Tell Meg by Paul Teague. I absolutely hate the protagonist. I know that's awful, but I got to the end of that book and I want to read the second book, even if it's just to hate watch him. Like, I sort of feel like this particular character in the second book, he hasn't learned his lesson. And there's a part of me that likes that because sometimes I need to learn the same lesson twice, but I feel like he hasn't changed. I sort of feel like he's going to make the same mistake again. And there's a part of me that wants to watch it. Like, he's the character I like to hate. I sort of feel like hopefully Paul isn't offended by it, but that's what you want. You want your reader to have a reaction to the character, even if it's they hate them and want to read the book too. He's still won, right? Sorry, it's up there, that book. But unlike the transition between Don't Tell Meg and The Murder Place, I don't have that hook at the end of book 1. There is an allusion to the story continuing on at some point, but there's no immediate draw to the next book. Then there's, the elephant in the room. I only have 2 books out in a series. I've got 2 prequels. I've got the first book in another series. So that's 3. And I've got 2 books in a series. And when you have only got 2 books because it's a mystery series, you don't necessarily need to read all the books in order. But they're there for those of you who like to read things in order. But because it's mystery, there's no overarching plot. You can just sort of start reading at book 7 if that's how you wanted to do it. But because there's only 2 books available at this stage, there's only a reader only has 5 opportunities to find my books in amongst the millions of books that are available on the various ebook retailers and bookstore websites, right? They've only got 5 opportunities in amongst millions of books. So spoiler alert, they don't find my books. So there's the question of, am I expecting too much at this stage? And the answer to that question is probably yeah, because that's just my own character flaw. So discoverability is low for the reasons that I've pointed out. I only have 4 books and 1 standalone. And 1 is a first in series, and there are no other books in that series, and the 2 are a part of the same series. So this is having an impact on my book sales. I'm guessing that if I had 4 books in the same series, that my sales would look a little differently, but I don't. And for me, I wanted to create multiple entries into my series so I wasn't just relying on one avenue. If readers decide they don't like one of the entry points into my series, there's another one I can use. And part of this is the curse of writing multiple series at once. I sort of knew this going in, but at the same time, even though I know it's going to be slow, me getting sales is going to be slow, there's a part of me that's still expecting things to be different, even though I know that this is quite a common thing. If you start with writing 2 series, I've heard it from people like Lindsay Baroka and other people, and it's like, why would things be different for me? But at the same time, my expectations are still quite high for me. Whereas when I hear her story, I think, yeah, that makes sense. But for me, it doesn't. So I've realized the other epiphany I've had is that I think the price for the second book might be too high considering the first is free. So I'm sort of saying, get this book for free and then spend $3.99 on book 2. So I've changed the price for book 2 temporarily to 99 cents with the intention of, pushing a promo on book 1 and see how many people will be tempted to immediately buy book 2, because book 2 actually has a hook to book 3 and it's quite hooky. I've been told that it's like, I can't wait to see what happens next, because I put him in this situation and he gets this phone call at the end and they think, oh, what's going to happen? So the tactic seems to be working well-ish at the moment, but it's really too soon to say. And because it was working well, not that these 2 events are not related at all, for some reason Amazon took my book off free on the US store, and I was like, why? have you done that? Like, so I've got to email them again and sort of say, hey, this book it's still free on Apple. I think Apple changed the price back from free to full price on their own. And because Amazon are only looking towards the Apple store and not the other stores, because it's free on Kobo, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and Fnac, like all of the other places, but they only look at Apple. So I did try to move the needle a little bit on Kobo, and I tried Facebook ads, and it's just not working. I'm finding it really hard to sell on Kobo at the moment, and I felt tempted to pull the plug on going wide, but I think this is just me being short-sighted and me just not waiting until I've got 5 books in the same series before I start thinking about whether I should just exclusively sell on Amazon. And I'm hoping I'll be smart enough not to do that, but you never know. I want to leave room for me making what this version of me knows to be a mistake. I do think exclusivity is a mistake, but if it works for you, that's fine. But I'm just aware that Amazon has a habit of changing the rules, and I don't like that. But I digress. Let's move on to Barnes & Noble, because I sort of promised that in the introduction, didn't I? If you've heard something useful in this episode that was helpful to you and you'd like to support the show, then buy me a coffee for as little as $2 at buymeacoffee.com/author80hey. So I tried to go direct to Barnes & Noble, but I came up with a few issues in regards to taxation, and it drives me spare because the IRS is the Income and Revenue Scheme. I think that's what it stands for. Not 100% sure. I'm not American, so sorry. I'll point out what they did and I'll get into why I disagree with it. So Barnes & Noble were determined to tax me 30% withholding, even in spite of the treaty that exists between the IRS and the United Kingdom and other countries. So they're going against, like, I can go onto the IRS, highlight the treaty where it says I'm supposed to pay 0 withholding tax on items that I sell in the US with the intention of declaring them as a part of my income in the United Kingdom when I pay tax at the end of the financial year. This is the agreement, right? So in spite of that, they're just putting this blanket 30% withholding on everybody. So even though they say they're open to publishing authors from other countries, they've got no idea what they're doing. They don't even understand their own tax laws. And I sort of disagree with them doing this. Like, if you don't understand the taxation laws, your own taxation laws and your agreements with other countries, you shouldn't be open to publishing direct with other authors. So I explained to them and they said, oh, we have to do this. And then I replied back with, actually, you don't. They forwarded me information and I could highlight stuff in that information that said I was right. And I was like, is this really happening? So I replied back and I explained there's actually a treaty between the IRS and the United Kingdom that says that I don't have to pay withholding. And the other thing is when you sign up for them and you fill out the tax form, it's the least user-friendly tax form. You have to go to the IRS, download the form. It's not you don't fill it out digitally like you do with Draft2Digital, Amazon, Google Play. This is much easier to use on Google Play, believe it or not. You know you're doing something wrong if Google Play is easier to use than you. Just going to put it out there. Because Google are notorious for making their products easier for their engineers than they are for their users. It's just how they roll. But their stuff is free, right? So you get what you pay for. Like filling out the tax form was a nightmare. So I had to open up all the other tax forms and sort of see this is how they're filled out for these reasons. So I filled it out exactly the same as it's filled out across all the other distributors and platforms like Apple as well. I made sure it was exactly the same as all of them. Like, I'm paying 0% tax everywhere else except for Barnes & Noble. So I pulled my books from Barnes & Noble and went back to Draft2Digital because it's not worth the hassle to be unnecessarily taxed so I can access to some secret categories and so-called promotions. And I've seen that promotion section and it is not worth this drama. Like, there is barely any promotions in this. I would say that the Kobo promotions tab is way better than the Barnes & Noble one. The Barnes & Noble one had like 2 things and I wouldn't even consider it. I'd rather mess around with Facebook ads and try and make that work than use one of their in-house promotions. And those categories, they aren't any better than the categories you choose when you go through Draft2Digital, because I think they're official categories that they use in every bookstore. And there's nothing wrong with those categories. They're quite good. And I don't see how these extra categories are going to make discoverability any better. Considering to me, it feels hyped. And unless you're in America, you live in America, I don't see going direct with Barnes & Noble as a thing that's going to be a good choice for you to make. I know this is super brutal too. Like, I know, I'm aware, and part of the reason why I'm being brutal is I have worked in finance before. I did sort of study financial planning for a bit in the context of the Australian economic environment and their taxation laws. So I do understand a little bit. And this is why it just annoys me, because all it takes is for one person to go through and make these few changes, and it doesn't have to be a drama, but it is. So I think I did this at the end of March. I'm still waiting for Barnes & Noble support staff to get back to me about the withholding, about the W8 form and them changing the 30% back to 0. I still haven't got a email back. So when they said, I'm going to forward it on to support staff, this other support staff in this other area, I have a funny feeling the area doesn't exist. And I was just put in the too hard basket, and they were probably crossing their fingers hoping that I would go back to a distributor. And they got what they wanted, right? There was nothing more I can do with this, and I felt really ripped off. And I do feel like people give out advice like this and they don't consider how this might work for people in other countries other than their own country. The other thing is about going wide. I don't see how publishing directly is any better than going through a distributor, because a distributor makes it easier. Like, Draft2Digital make publishing to Barnes & Noble so much easier. And that's not just me just assuming that now. I know that for a fact. They're a nightmare. When I publish on Draft2Digital, I don't get any withholding tax because Draft2Digital, for some reason, they acknowledge that treaty, whereas Barnes & Noble don't. And it's frustrating. The other thing is, when you go wide, you're probably not going to see any success until you get a huge backlist. And because I'm choosing to go wide, I need to sort of constantly remind myself, this is what I've signed up for. I need to build a backlist before I'm going to see any sort of consistent sort of month-by-month sales that are worth talking about. I need to constantly remind myself that this is how it is. And I'm also not doing a lot in terms of promotion. I'm not consistently promoting my books. I'm just doing it haphazardly. Whenever I get upset about my book sales, I'll, do a promotion and try and move the needle, but that isn't consistent. And, I'm getting inconsistent results. Spoiler alert. So that's it. I'm losing my voice. So those are the things I wanted to talk about in terms of book marketing. Now for what I've titled this episode after, and I screwed up my mystery series. And when I wrote the script for this episode, I found this therapeutic. And I want to talk about it because I think it's important. Towards the end of February, I started writing book 3 in the James Lalonde Amateur Sleuth mystery series, Into the Dark. So far, I've written, I think it's more than that actually. I'm going to give you up-to-date statistics. So the word count is currently 8,274 words. And I've been writing this book on and off between working with my editor on The Locked Room and publishing tasks. And it has been an enjoyable experience. However, in April, I hit a wall in my writing process after realizing that the third book is technically not a mystery because the whodunit is known from the start for several reasons. First is because I've written scenes from the killer's point of view and their identity is known, and I haven't done the same old first person with the intent of disguising their identity, because you don't refer to yourself when you talk about yourself. No one talks about themselves in the third person. So when you use a first person identity, the the character's name isn't known until someone kind of says it, or you find another creative way of doing that, right? And secondly, there is a subtle reference to this person in the second book, and I've just spoiled. Not that I've got readers for my books listening to this podcast, so technically I'm breaking the rules of the genre, and I'm not delivering on the promise of the whodunit. So it's a thriller, and so is book 4. So now I feel trapped and I have no idea what to do or even how to change my story so it's more of a mystery. Although I could introduce another potential villain in order to create a mystery so the reader doesn't know the whodunit. So if you have thoughts on my dilemma, feel free to email me at hello@author80hey.com or leave your thoughts in the comment section on the blog or on social media. So what happens in the story is this person's kind of getting revenge for what they feel was wrong that was done to them. Whether you actually think that what was done to them was actually wrong is a completely different topic for another time. But from their point of view, this person did them wrong, these people, and they're going around and they're, getting their revenge one by one. So it's a bit of a serial killer, and I reference them and in the first book. So it's not so much a whodunit, it's he needs to stop and catch this person before he goes through his creepy list of getting revenge against people who did him wrong in the past. Maybe I am overthinking it. Maybe, actually, I'm going to have a look. The thing I didn't type into Google was mystery novels where the villain is known from the beginning. Oh, actually, this is a thing. I'm not doing something new. This isn't a thriller. Actually, this is a division of the mystery. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad I recorded this episode today. So what I've done is when you start off a mystery novel where the villain is actually known, because usually in a mystery novel, the villain isn't known until about halfway through the midpoint is a place where you can reveal the villain. Sometimes I push that way until the start of the third act and James turns up and it's a different person than what he's expecting. But what I've done is I've created an inverted detective story or a how catch them. Instead of like Knives Out isn't a whodunit, it's how done it. It's like, how was he murdered? And at some point in the story you think, how can she get away with this? And then, sorry, I've just spoiled it for you. But this is something slightly different where it's a how catch them. It's how can the detective catch them, which is essentially what James is doing in this, is how can he stop this person and catch them in the act so they don't cause any more harm than what they've already caused. So this is a thing. So I haven't completely screwed up. I'm just doing something that's not typical that's in the genre. Yeah, it's called an inverted detective story, or in my case, an inverted amateur sleuth story. So it's a how catch them. Oh, I feel so much better about this already. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to embrace this how catch them sort of scenario. I'm going to have two villains. So at the start, you sort of think, oh my God, there's either one of these people could be really doing this. Or are they both doing it at the same time? There's a lot of, there's a mystery surrounding what's actually happening. And I hope that'll be enough to distract from the actual clues. I still don't show the crime actually. No, I do show the crime taking place, just not the first one is seen through the lens of a character. So I could set up a scenario where there's two potential villains and then just lean into the fact that he has to stop them because he knows he feels compelled to stop them. James is one of those people that once he gets involved with something or realizes that there's something going wrong, he can't help but not get involved. He's a bit of a nosy Parker. Maybe nosy Parker isn't exactly the right term. He's a bit of a interfering busybody. He can't help it. It's just something that he does. He gets involved. So while I was feeling stuck with book 3 in the James Lalonde mystery series, I opened up my unfinished cozy mystery and started working on that novella again. Just a side note, the switching between stories happened before I realised why I was stuck with book 3, but back to the cozy mystery. I added more depth to the narrative point of view in the first chapter in order to establish a connection between the reader and the protagonist. But I hit another brick wall when I realised that my main character, I've made her a grieving widow in desperate need of a fresh start, but she doesn't have her fresh start. She doesn't get her fresh start in this book. This is sort of what makes her consider wanting that fresh start. And I wondered whether this character actually suits the cozy mystery genre, or if again I'm breaking the genre rules, because grief can be quite dark. Not that I go deep into, the darkness of grief, but she's still grieving. She misses her husband. And I feel like cozy mysteries are supposed to be light and fluffy and not where a character is sort of suppressing, feelings of really missing somebody. And I will point out that it's by no means dark in the sense that she's, considering doing something really unhealthy, but she's just sad that her husband is gone and she misses him. I didn't want to give her a divorce because I just don't understand why people cheat. Why can't you just leave your relationship and then move on after that? Why do you have to have your egg and why do you have to have your cake and eat it too? I don't understand that. And I don't want to go into the nuances of why a relationship could break down because it's going to make you paranoid. I'm an overthinker and so I killed off her spouse. And also it's a potential story for later on, right? That's also a bonus for it. Now I'm stuck writing 2 novels. Not stuck writing 2 novels. I'm stuck with writing 2 novels. Was that even more clarifying? I'm stuck in the process of writing 2 novels. I'm stuck in the series for 2 series for the same reason. I feel like I've broken the genre rules in both my series, but maybe not. Maybe this is a case of, like before, I just Googled mystery novels where the villain is known, and I could just look for grieving widows as characters of cozy mysteries and find out actually how many of those sort of books actually out there exists. Because usually the ones I read are little old ladies and stuff like that, and I want to write something similar but different. But don't worry, I'm not going to start a 3rd novel. I'm not that stupid. So that's all the things I can discuss in terms of writing, editing, and book marketing and publishing. Now I have an important question to ask you. Are you a UK author who has experienced taxation issues at Barnes & Noble, or have you just completely skipped this trauma altogether and just published to Barnes & Noble via Draft2Digital? Come on over to the blog post and share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section. Also, if you have any thoughts on, my 3rd book in my mystery series, sort of feeling like a thriller, because again, book 4 has a thriller element to it. There's still mystery surrounding it, but it definitely has that sort of more thriller vibe. Whether you think I really am breaking the rules of the genre by doing this, or whether I'm just overthinking it. If you have thoughts about that too, then feel free to let me know in the comments section over on the blog or on social media, or email me directly. And while I have this thought as well, because this is episode 99, the next episode is going to be the 100th episode, and I thought it might be nice to do a celebratory Ask Me Anything session. So come on over to authorpreneurpodcast.com/question. Why did I forget that? It was such an easy URL. And submit your question for me to answer on the show. In the next episode of the podcast will obviously be that milestone episode. After that, I will release another episode where I will discuss the anatomy of a scene. Thank you for watching, and happy reading and writing, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Authorpreneur Podcast. If you love this episode, then hit the subscribe button and leave a review on your favourite podcasting app. I'm your host, Amelia D. Hay, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.